This is Attention Different. Welcome. Our series is called Adulting with ADHD, and today we are talking with Marlena, who is trying to receive her formal diagnosis. It has been long, she has been strong, but a few things have gone wrong. So we're trying to figure out what to do about getting her diagnosis. First, we need to know where you're at, Marley. Bring us up to speed. Where are you at this point? And I have a feeling that Erin's going to provide some helpful next steps.
I spoke to my GP about the fact that I did the BDEFS scale and that I was waiting on this psychiatrist that my insurance covers to make an appointment with me. They were very backed up. I was given a date. In the meantime, I did express to my doctor that while I haven't gotten the formal diagnosis, I have taken these steps, and it would be, and I've tried Concerta before, and it would mean a lot if I can get a prescription. Turns out there's a shortage for months now, which we know about. And so when I went to my pharmacy, they couldn't fulfill the prescription. However, they did recommend to me that since I had been prescribed extended release, that they are getting some batches of IR and that they're getting some batches of Ritalin, but that it kind of goes back and forth. And the best way for me to get any kind of medication right now is to call ahead, see what they have in, then contact my doctor. Then my doctor would change my prescription to whatever is available.
Erin, why don't you take us away and explain why what Marlena just said is so not normal?
Yeah, what you're doing with Marlena is just uncharacteristic. I mean, there have been times where it's been hard to get stimulant medications because they're a Schedule II drug, and that makes it hard in and of itself. But right now we're in this period of time where, because of this shortage, they're actually asking ADHDers to go through all of these multi-step processes, which is exactly what we're struggling with with executive functioning. So welcome to the nonsensical world of the FDA and pharmacies, where it's like, yeah, go ahead and schedule and call back your doctor, because it's not hard for you as an ADHDer to call your doctor again after you've already done this and have them double check what's in stock with us, but we're not going to tell you ahead of time because it might be gone by the time you get the prescription in.
My story gets worse.
Okay.
So I call my doctor. Thankfully, I can do a telehealth appointment, but I have to pay for every one. It's not like I can just have this open conversation and dialogue with him. So I tell him what's going on, and he goes, okay, you need to just call a bunch of pharmacies and see which one has it. I push back a little and say, well, they're telling me that you can call this CVS and check in. And he goes, well, there's a few pharmacies, like smaller family-owned pharmacies, that might have it. Begins to tell me that I'm not the only one who's dealing with this and that he's empathetic, but everyone's dealing with this. So I call a bunch of pharmacies. I call family pharmacies. Everyone's like, nope, 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 nope. I also find out, and I don't know if this is true, that supposedly if you call multiple pharmacies for the same prescription drug, you could get flagged. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's just a rumor.
The pharmacies can flag you as like a drug-seeking, person, and unfortunately, that is one of the stigmas that comes with having stimulant medications. We can get inappropriately labeled as like these addicts, drug-seeking people, and it's just
Particularly with stimulants, right, Erin? Like that. This is not the first time I've heard this. Actually, I've heard this from.
I've had clients' experiences too.
Yeah. So I contacted the psychiatrist clinic, which is supposed to help me with my formal speak and have a formal diagnosis. I explained to their front office that please just, if I don't answer my phone, if you could find a way to reach out to me, because I might just be on set and I can't pick it up. They don't do that. They call me. They call me. I can't pick up. I get the missed call. I call them back maybe 3 minutes later, and nobody answers. I get put on hold. I can't get a hold. It was just,
Sorry, we didn't think you wanted your appointment anymore because you didn't confirm over the phone.
yeah. Even though I have an appointment, because they do that whole, the pre-appointment, and they go, there's just a series of questions about depression and
Yeah,
COVID.
because we also know that all psychiatrists are practicing gurus who understand deeply that no communication is its own form of communication.
But this isn't even a psychiatrist. This is just the person who's booking the appointment. So that's even another layer of irony, right? It's usually just a generic
Medical technician or
like
medical
a
assistant,
coordinator who's like, "Do you feel
receptionist.
sad? Have you felt sad? Do you want to end your life?" And I'm kind of like, I want to just I want to get a diagnosis. So I missed that call. I can't get back to them. I'm on set, but I was going to be able to carve out time to leave. And so now I call my doctor and I go, "Look, I I know that there's a lot going on, but I missed an appointment. I can't get medication. And I need you to please call the pharmacy, because I did speak to a lovely pharmacist, and some doctors are in fact calling ahead, because there's no point in you just writing out a prescription for something for them to go, we don't have it, and then I'm not going to know until I get a text message from CVS that my prescription can't be refilled." And he hemmed and hawed and told me that there's a lot they have to do and that he really can't spend all day. This is verbatim. He goes, "I can't spend all day with my nurses individually making phone calls for every patient I have, but I will try."
Okay.
I mean, Aaron will expand on this, I'm sure, but it's one of those unfortunate, to me at least, little column A, little column B moments where little column A, not appropriate discourse from a doctor, from a practicing doctor to their patient who's having a crisis. B, I wouldn't be surprised if that person does have overwhelm, does have way too many patients and
Oh,
way
for
too
sure.
few staff. Yeah.
He said that he actually said, "I have lots of clients." He goes, "I have lots of clients right now that are yelling at me about this, and it's trust me, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm really sorry." And I just tried to reiterate, like, "I'm not yelling at you." He goes, "No, no, no, I know." I go, "Okay, but I'm not angry. I understand the situation. It's just this has been going on for months for me, and I'm just trying to get a formal diagnosis and just a little cushion."
Okay. So wait. So now it sounds like you got really frustrated at this point and are like, all right, I'm not getting in for this appointment to get an assessment for my diagnosis. The pharmacy's out of these medications. So then what did you do?
I booked another appointment with the psychiatrist because I also understand that I work freelance, so this is what it is. And then I told my fellow ADHD friend that this was going on with me, and it turns out that he was prescribed generic Concerta, and but is no longer taking it because he switched over to Vyvanse. And he goes, "Not trying to be a drug pusher, but this is just sitting in my drawer, and do you want some?" And so I gave him a big hug, and I took it.
We're not necessarily advocating for our listeners to go out and try to seek medications off the streets and with their friends and whoever else they can. But these are desperate times. So let's be honest. If we're not able to get the medicine we need through the available routes, then, what you did, Marlena, I think is commendable and is what you needed to do and at the time to get the help that you needed. And unfortunately, you were in that situation, because I don't want our listeners to think that she routinely would do this or something like that. This is just this is the situation that we're in, and people are being forced to find ways to help themselves and help their brains function better and get the medications that they need. So, yeah, I'm sorry you had to deal with that, but I'm glad that you have a little bit of coverage.
Had it been a stronger prescription, I don't think I would have done that, because I'm still learning my
Were they
prescription.
18 or 36? Do you know what the milligram
18.
was?
18.
So
And that's what
it
I was
was
taking.
okay.
The
So it's
lowest.
equivalent. Okay, it's the medication. It's equivalent. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
All that stuff makes sense. Yeah. So if you're doing any of this stuff at home, yeah, it's not all the medications are equivalent. We don't want to say like, hey, go out and try these, try your friends because that's, they have extras of this. It's like you could take too much. You want to be very careful about doing this stuff. So just word of caution there for our listeners.
We know that one of the issues with medication is with youth and adults is selling it, right? Is people giving away medication in a
Diverting
nefarious way.
medications.
Yeah, right. And we are not talking about that here. I want to be clear about that as well. We are talking about Marlena having done her own homework, know which prescription she takes, speak to friends in a concerned and very real, authentic tone, right? I am concerned and I am not confident that I will be able to do the work that I need to do to thrive, survive, fill in the blank, right? And approached a friend with that concern, and that friend, in their own volition, offered some of their medication that matches her prescription so that she could skate by for a little bit longer. That's what happened here. That's the allegory. And that's what Aaron is pointing to, that we are all pressured to have to do right now during this crisis that is extremely different and polar opposite from somebody selling their drugs.
Honestly, I've been spending months, I mean, decades unmedicated. But when I was able to, with a doctor, try out medication, it was life changing. I felt the difference. I felt myself not slipping into rumination. This is why it sometimes feels very vulnerable for me to even tell my family that I'm seeking out medication and doing this vodcast, because I keep having to fight this imposter syndrome. Like, everybody is struggling with this, but then I take the medication and I go, oh no, this makes me feel like at a baseline. If I'm going the correct course of getting a formal diagnosis, I am intrigued how fast it would be for these, $99 over the phone assessments, and would this expedite my process?
You're kind of wondering what's the fastest option here.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in limbo. I feel like I have all of the tools for my for my journey, and everyone's just not available. So I keep being like, look, it's all here. Please, please.
There's options out there for these kind of things. There's companies like Done, Cerebral, Talkiatry. There's ADHD Online. A bunch of different ones that have popped up, especially around the pandemic. You're in a unique position because I gave you a more exhaustive assessment of your executive functioning and an ADHD screening already, which most people get from their psychiatrist. So you're in this like unique position where you like already have some of that. You have those tools in your arsenal. So you have the BDEFS and you have the ASRS 5, and you have these anecdotal diagnosis or kind of pre-diagnosis. What are we going to call this? Like you have recommendations for a diagnosis from a therapist, from friends, from us who know you very well as fellow ADHDers, saying there's a high likelihood, as we said in our previous episode, over 90 some percent that you have ADHD. So you're not going into this blind. You're not like someone off the street trying to go in. So what do you think you're going to do?
I guess, yeah, I'm gonna pursue one of those as well. I think that it'll make for interesting content and an interesting experiment. And also, I'm at the point where I don't care which avenue I take. I just want it I want it to happen. The question is though, that doesn't really solve me getting the medication I need. And the reason that I wanted to go the route of speaking with a psychiatrist is because I wanted to treat this tenderly. It's not to say that I don't know what an over the phone online $99 assessment looks like. I don't know. Maybe they will be extremely thorough. Maybe they will ask to talk to my family members. Maybe I I guess I'm asking you, what else can I be doing while I'm in this limbo? And if this drags on longer and I don't get the medicine that I need, I'm, as well as getting ads on Instagram and TikTok for done, I'm also getting a lot of ads for nootropics and thesis and anti-stimulant medication. There is a lot of fear mongering with it, which is,
Thank you for mentioning. I was about to jump in.
well, you can. It's just very much aligned with what I grew up with too, where it was like,
Yeah.
oh, it's very bad for you. It's speed. It's like, it's a, it was just a lot of
Yeah.
negative connotation. So I see these advertisements where it's like a woman sitting down and it's like, this is your brain on stimulants. And it's like, and it's like, this is your brain on thesis. I have been scared, weirded out, worried that this medication is a crutch and is not actually solving anything. I mean, I used to even, if I can be vulnerable for a minute, I used to question Steven and be like, I don't know, dude, stimulants, that's bad for you. Without,
Yeah, you used to ask a lot of old world questions like, well, we just don't have a lot of long-term studies on like the effects on your body and your brain over time. And I think maybe what if you have permanently made yourself like faster, talk quicker, like more this, that, and the third. And it's not to suggest that that's ignorant or like to such a degree that it's embarrassing or anything. It's perfectly appropriate and normal to do logic like that, right? This is a stimulant medication. You keep taking it from the age of 10 for years and years and years. Our brains go really quickly to how could it not have an effect, right? How could it not do something after you do that for a while? And it's just a tragic misunderstanding of how the medication works.
Stimulant meds have been used safely since the 1950s, 1960s. We have a lot of evidence of their effectiveness, and the way that they work is that they help to prevent the reuptake of dopamine in the brain. And dopamine is one of the neurotransmitters in our brain that is responsible for motivation, sustaining focus, and helping us direct our attention towards goal-directed tasks and activities. And the ADHD brain is it needs an extra amount of stimulation. The ADHD brain is seeking stimulation. We have a deficiency in the catecholamine system of our brain and in the brain wiring that connects various parts of our brain, the prefrontal cortex to other, limbic systems and other areas of the brain that are involved with the executive functioning tasks that people need to do on a day-to-day basis. And the way that the stimulants help someone with ADHD is that there's the ADHD brain doesn't necessarily have a deficiency in the amount of dopamine. That's one of the kind of myths out there. Like they've done studies and they've seen that ADHDers probably have the exact same amount of dopamine, but how it's being utilized, how it's being signaled, how it's being transmitted across the brain wiring, that's where there's some kind of a breakdown, where there's inefficiency. And that's how ADHD medications help. Is what they do is they help provide more available dopamine, and it kind of like covers your circuitry. It helps to flood that. So whatever's going on that's happening, and we don't know for sure. This is still kind of something that's up for debate. The neurochemistry of ADHD, it's very complex. There's theories, there's ongoing research on this. But what we know is it works. It helps to raise the levels of dopamine and then subsequently norepinephrine in the brain, because dopamine is kind of a precursor. It helps with norepinephrine, which is also known as like neuroadrenaline. And that helps our brains function the way that they're supposed to. So because we have this inefficiency of the use of dopamine in our brains, the stimulant medications are actually not giving us an advantage. What they're doing is they're helping our brains level up. They're helping us get to this place of what the neurotypical folks have in terms of their functioning. They help us
not level
get
up,
closer.
but level out. Like
level out.
even
Level out. Yeah, level out. Level ourselves up to the baseline of what other
It's
people
not our
are
fault that we're
experiencing.
very interested in everything. So once we're leveled out, we're better.
Yeah, and I like the point that Aaron's making here, that even like in economy, like economics came into my head. Like, it's not a problem of supply. Like, what you're suggesting is we even believe like there's enough dopamine supply. The problem is demand. Our brains demand it at weird times and weird instances with weird stimuli.
Yeah.
It's not regular demand. So the dopamine, the stimulant medication helps regulate the demand.
The reason we are not able to focus or have this distractibility, this impulsivity, the hyperactivity, some of these other core features of ADHD is that our brains are actually focusing on many different things and not filtering out all of the external stimuli that's coming in. We hear noises, we see sights, we have disruptions, we have random thoughts, and then all of a sudden, where's our brain? Off on those tangents, off thinking and listening to those things which are off task. So our brains are actually not deficit in attention. They're inconsistent with our attention, and we probably have too much attention at certain points in time. And what the stimulants do is, ironically, they calm our brain down because it has this counterintuitive effect. As we stimulate the brain with more dopamine, our brain can actually close in and focus and parse out what we're wanting to focus on. 80% of ADHD, diagnosed ADHDers who take stimulant medications benefit. There's a subsection of 20% that don't necessarily find benefits or can't tolerate the stimulants for whatever reason. But most people, the vast majority of people, find benefits from stimulants, and over 60% of their core symptoms get improvement, which is huge. So that means stimulant medication is one of the most effective things we can do to help our brains function better and to level out, as Stephen said.
So use precaution, right? When your social media feed sends you video imagery of little pills surrounded by flames in a volcano trying to convince you that this thing will light up your life and destroy worlds, okay, if you start taking this medication. That level of extremity, I'm going to quote another mentor of mine, nothing is ever as good or as bad as we think it is. And when someone is trying to sell you, snake oil salesman is trying to sell you an idea, a concept that this thing, which is as powerful and positive as Aaron is underlining, is somehow going to ruin your life, please take pause and consider the source and consider where it's coming from. Aaron, I would love for you to take us away, since we've just talked about it would be great if Marlena had access to medication, but since she doesn't, and we need to get that's 40 to 60% of symptoms in check. What are some ways we could do that while we're waiting?
The options for treatment and the options to help yourself are in these broad categories. There's some natural approaches. So the natural approaches, the ones that have the most evidence here, are exercise. Exercise is wonderful. There's a great book by John Rady, who is an MD, and he was a co-author of Driven to Distraction with Ned Hallowell back in the day. But he came out with a whole book on this. It's called Spark. We'll link to it in the show notes as well. But that is all about the research of exercise and how it's one of the best natural ways to help focus your brain, especially if you do it early in the day. So something that gets your heart rate up, cardio, it doesn't have to be a huge amount, even 20 to 30 minutes. That can drastically improve your ability to focus and to regulate your emotions and help your executive functioning. The next kind of natural thing would be sleep. Sleep is huge. If we have a sleep deficit, right? If we're doom scrolling on our phones late at night or gaming into the evening or binging a show, then we're in a sleep deficit. We're not getting adequate amount of sleep. So your brain, your executive functions are not going to work as well as they could. So focusing on getting good, consistent quality sleep, getting enough of it, getting somewhere in the range of, 7.5 to, 8 hours. Some people even maybe 8.5. It all depends on what you need. Everyone's a little different in how many hours they need, but sleep is key. The other thing that can help is mindfulness and meditation practices. Taking a few deep breaths, that can help calm your brain. It can help refocus you. So box breathing, 4-7-9 technique can help for relaxing yourself and with anxiety and refocusing your attention. Our attention follows our intentions. So if we can set strong intentions and be mindful of what we're doing, plan things, be intentional about what you're doing, which is essentially mindfulness, right? Being aware in the moment. That kind of stuff can really help day to day with ADHD because you're practicing strengthening that attentional muscle. So dedicated meditation and moment by moment mindfulness are great practices to add in. Also, there's ADHD coaching, finding an actual certified life coach. I'm an ADHD coach. I have a coaching practice, Potential Within Reach. So I do that for my day job. But also therapy. So therapy, behavioral coaching, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, has been shown to be very effective as well. So the behavioral approaches of ADHD coaching and therapy are really also important to point out here. And then the last one here, in terms of the natural stuff, is what I would say is like your mindset, your own self-talk, and your mindset about how you're doing. If you're being really negative with yourself, if you're having this internal voice that's self-critical, that's going to detract from your ability to stay focused, because you're going to be getting yourself spun out on these emotional tangents, and that'll distract you from attending to the things you need to attend to and being intentional. So it goes hand in hand with kind of emotional regulation. If you can be kind to yourself, if you can employ some self-compassion, you can check yourself to try to not get so down on yourself, especially in these times with stimulant medication shortage. It's just really critical for us to go easy on ourselves. Let's remind myself of all the things I'm trying to do. Some of these things are outside of my control. I'm doing my best to try to get these medications, to try to get my diagnosis handled, to seek treatment, to improve myself. And in spite of my best efforts, this life happens. So that's life is going to happen. We have to work on kind of cutting ourselves some slack. So those are the natural things, and I'll bring up nootropics too, because I think nootropics, supplements are another thing. You mentioned some of not all nootropics are equal. It's kind of the wild west out there. We have to be careful. It's not regulated. A lot of these supplement companies, there's very little evidence or third party studies being done. The easiest thing for you to do, Marlena, is like try to use something that's already pre-configured. And one of the best ones that I know of is MindLab Pro. There's a lot of research behind that brand, and they have some very pure ingredients and things like that. That if you just go to Amazon and try to get this stuff, you don't know always where they're making the medicine and what additives and other junk that's getting into that industrial process. Yeah. So I think MindLab Pro might be a good place to start.
You had once told me that some people, I don't want to misquote, but that some people will take stimulant medication for a certain amount of days and then actually kind of like reboot with nootropics and then take the stimulant medication. And I'm wondering to stretch out my supply and have this kind of cycle. I'm just curious to know more about that cycle. As something to try.
So I think what you're referring to is I talk about one of the known drawbacks of stimulants is that we know that there's an amount of tolerance that happens over time. So at first, when people start taking stimulants, within the first few months, they experience a great amount of benefit, but then that drops pretty markedly, and it levels out. It kind of plateaus at a certain point. And the more you take the stimulant, the more your natural dopamine production levels, those decrease as well. So your brain is adjusting itself back down to its own. It's like its homeostasis. It's kind of trying to downregulate its own natural dopamine production because it's having this influx of an artificial dopamine coming in. So if at first your dopamine was like here, I know people can't see this, but I'm like putting my, if you're listening to this, like I'm kind of showing that, there's one level here of your natural production of dopamine, but then it drops down because now the influx of medication is down regulating your own production of dopamine. So that's what happens with the tolerance. You develop tolerance over time, but taking breaks, taking some medication vacations, which is like, a few days, maybe over the weekend, or taking less of it over the weekend can be very helpful. And so there's different ways for people to try to do this. And obviously, you want to talk to your prescriber about this. Any of these things, talk to, your prescriber about these. But what I have seen is that we can help with the tolerance build up by taking breaks and taking less of the stimulant, and we can use nootropics to fill in. So it's not like your brain is devoid of everything. You're just supplementing and helping yourself not have that crash, that feeling of depletion. Some of the most helpful nootropics and supplements for that kind of stuff are, I would say, for helping with dopamine, norepinephrine, acetylcholine levels, L-tyrosine, which is a natural occurring amino acid. That is one of the best that we can use. There's also, different forms of that, like NALT, different types of forms of L-tyrosine. But what that is it helps to, it helps to not give you more dopamine in your brain, but it helps the catecholamine system and the amount of dopamine you have to function better. So it optimizes some of that. So taking some L-tyrosine along with a few other things can help. There's ashwagandha, which is a root. It's been used in Ayurvedic Indian medicine for millennia. That helps with some anxiety. It helps with brain functioning. I think some of the best things we can do naturally with supplements, B vitamins, B6, B9, B12. So B vitamins, lion's mane mushroom helps with neurogenesis. Also, ginkgo biloba and ginseng can be good. They kind of help function as neuroprotective and also semi-stimulant. Ginseng kind of works that way.
I wanted to leave this sentiment of how complex and complicated this is to please do your best to give yourself a pat on the back, to applaud yourself for making it to this resource, right? There are resources out there, tons of them, to help you get the diagnosis, to get the right medication prescription, to medication monitor. We could talk for hours just about monitoring medication and titration and changing types of medication. But the thing I wanted to leave on this table here is there's no binary here. There is no this is what you do and this is what you do not do. This is what you don't do and this is what you do. Aaron and I had the pleasure late last year, of going to CHAD, Children and Adults with ADHD, in a conference in Dallas that year. And one of the keynote speakers was Dr. James Swanson, who was on the teams that developed Adderall and Concerta, right? And that man, who admitted to us very early on, is a Texan and doesn't like to give apologies. That's how he said it. I'm a Texan, I don't like to apologize, but I'm here today to apologize. And his apology was that 20 years after the development of these stimulant drugs, we are now more aware of a tolerancy issue. And Aaron alluded to it earlier, that we are developing tolerances to these stimulant medications. If we take them consistently in exactly the same way, you're going to have to titrate up over and over and over again over time. We are still learning about how these medications interact with the body, but the bottom line is that nothing is as good or as bad as you think it is. Okay, so this stuff is a helpful tool. It's an extremely powerful tool. So this is a segment we're calling ADHD in the news. Recently, I have been searching for wild diagnosis stories. There are lots of them. And I stumbled on perhaps the craziest one, the wildest and the most exciting and thrilling one. And it comes from one of the Daniels. The Daniels are a pair of directors, Oscar award-winning directors, who recently received their Oscar for a movie called Everything Everywhere All at Once. Woo. And without going way into the weeds, I will simply tell you, it is the greatest movie of all time. So there was an interview with Dan Kwan and with Daniel Scheinert by a guy named Han.
Directors.
And thank you. Yeah, two directors, Dan and Dan, the Daniels, the Dans. And Han Nguyen of Salon interviewed both of them for Everything Everywhere. And in it, there is, believe it or not, a profound moment about ADHD. So I'm going to just read these 4 or 5 paragraphs. It's a question from Han and the answers from Dan, but the Dans. Starting with Han. Everything Everywhere All at Once is one of those films where I really felt seen. And it wasn't just because it features an Asian American immigrant woman, but the concept of feeling overwhelmed really hit home for me. I've suspected for a while, and a lot of my friends have been encouraging me to get diagnosed for ADHD. And so watching it, I wondered, how is this film exactly what I feel? Was there any of that influence in this film? Dan Kwan's first answer. That's amazing. When we first started writing this movie, we knew we wanted to make a movie about chaos and about this overwhelming feeling that everyone's been feeling the past 6 years, or 34 years, or all throughout history of mankind. But when we started writing, we were like, oh, we should probably do a little bit of research about ADHD. Maybe the main character is undiagnosed and they don't know it. Daniel Scheinert. Yeah, we were like, maybe she's so distractible, she can go to the other universe with her brain. But then we're like, that might be offensive. We should Google it. Kwan, back to Daniel Kwan. So I started doing some research, and then I stayed up until like 4 in the morning, just reading everything I could find about it, just crying, just realizing that, oh my God, I think I have ADHD. So this movie is the reason why I got diagnosed. I got diagnosed, I went to therapy for a year and then went to a psychiatrist, and now I'm on meds, and it's such a beautiful cathartic experience to realize why your life has been so hard. This movie, obviously, when you look at it now, was made by someone with ADHD. And it's just funny how many people have come up to me after screenings and said, quote, "This feels like you're in my brain." And some of them are people like yourself who suspect that they have ADHD, and then other people who recently got diagnosed, because I think during the pandemic, a lot of people have been struggling in this new version of life where there is less structure, because ADHD people need structure. Otherwise, we fall apart. And so I love the fact that this movie can become a cathartic expression of me realizing this, but then also can be a way for people to talk about it in their own lives. And it makes sense if you do have ADHD and weren't diagnosed, because Asian immigrants don't care about that stuff. And then also, women historically have been way underdiagnosed because they weren't expressing their ADHD in the same way that men were or boys were. I have a lot of female friends who have, within the past 3 or 4 years, got diagnosed, and it's life-changing.
Oh my God.
So there you go.
But do you remember? Okay, I saw the movie in theaters, and wow. And I remember the scene. Okay, when Evelyn Wang is going to get audited and they're listing out all of the irresponsible purchase, she's terrible with money. I mean, the opening scene as a set designer, that opening scene where it's just piles of stuff and like papers, and it's in like, I was like, I know this house, I know this woman, I know all of it. And then she lists out all of her irresponsible purchases, and the husband's being really supportive and going, well, she wanted this karaoke night, well, she thought she wanted to be a bead maker, well, she is. I had the same reaction. I was like, me too. Do you want to know how many crafts and hobbies I've taken on over the 36 years? Quilling? Like, that is, I love the
Yeah.
movie even more now. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, the description of Daniel discovering his own ADHD through writing a movie about an ADHD character is the most ADHD flex I've heard in a minute. An Oscar award-winning movie and director, pair of directors, self-diagnosed, right? Not formally. Dan got a diagnosis, but self-screened for ADHD by doing the most ADHD thing possible, making a movie about ADHD and realizing in the middle of making it like, oh, this is me. I'm me, sobbing until 4 in the morning, and then really digging in their heels, right? Like, no, we're not insulting people. That's what this freaking movie is about, right?
Yeah. And
And
all the dimensions
we know
that they
what it's
go
about.
through. And just like, filmmaking is
Oh,
actually.
think about the daughter, Joy. I mean, they even have generational impact of it, right? You get Joy, who is extremely mad, upset, like
Depressed.
pissed at her mother, depressed, like dealing with her own complex mental conditions. And her intro, when that multiverse intro is her ADHDing the fuck out. I mean, there's like all these different costumes and props and graphic moments, and you're watching this daughter walk down the hall. And when I rewatch that scene, I'm like, the generational impact of ADHD, the generational impact of undiagnosed ADHD. Like, that's all that's hitting me is that research. Like, you've got this daughter who's livid, furious that this shit is going on.
Just a disclaimer about the nootropics. If you're taking any sort of antidepressants or any other psychotropic medications, be very careful. Check drug interactions and speak to your physician before trying nootropics, because even though they're natural and they appear harmless, they can create some complicated interactions if you take them with the wrong kinds of medications, and there can be some unpleasant side effects. So just putting that out there.